Here in Israel's biggest mass circulation newspaper, the headline, "Ready to Draw." This is a picture of a government minister who has recently taken his gun out of the safe and is now wearing it all the time.
2 people are dead and several others injured after one of the boldest attacks yet in the violence gripping Israel and the occupied territories. A gunman who was also armed with a knife opened fire at a bus station in Beersheba. He was killed, as was an Israeli soldier. Let's get the latest on this now from Al Jazeera's Andrew Simmons. He's in West Jerusalem for us. Andrew, what more do we know about what took place and, of course, the area itself?
Well, what happened was this. The police say, they originally said there were 2 attackers. They have changed that story now to 1 attacker. 1 attacker went into the bus station and immediately attacked a soldier. The soldier has since died, and there were a number of other people then also attacked, a total of 4 police officers and a number of civilians, all of them taken to hospital, but none apparently with life-threatening injuries. Now, the next stage of what happened, it has been subject to conflicting reports, but we're now told by the police that definitely they opened fire at 2 people. One was the alleged attacker, who is Arab, thought to be Palestinian. The other was of Eritrean nationality. Now, there is an admission now that that man was shot by mistaken identity, and he is critically ill in hospital. The Palestinian has died. Now, so we have a total of 2 dead and a number injured, and complete panic in this area, and also questions in Beersheba about why this man was able to get into a very busy public transport location when very stringent security regulations had been passed a number of days ago by the Israeli Prime Minister, insisting that army soldiers should support the security forces in all public places involving public transport, riding on trains, riding on buses, and also on trams. So this situation is not only brazen, but also sending yet another shudder through the people of Israel, Palestinians and Israelis alike.
And despite calls for calm, the incident now would show there are no signs of violence abating, Andrew. Any hope for international involvement, some sort of effort to bring about a resolution, to bring the 2 parties together?
Well, people can hope, but there is certainly no solid information stacked on the table to suggest that there could be a breakthrough. The major issue at the heart of all of this is the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, known as Temple Mount by Israelis. Now, Netanyahu made it quite clear before his cabinet meeting on Sunday that he wasn't prepared to negotiate with the Palestinians. He wasn't prepared to listen to calls from France to use international observers to see that there was no change in the way that things have always been at Al-Aqsa Mosque now compound. And this is an area now that's really at the heart of things. We're seeing the US Secretary of State, John Kerry, move towards talks with Benjamin Netanyahu in Germany, which is likely to be Wednesday or Thursday. He confirmed in Paris today, the US Secretary of State, that he would be having that meeting. He planned that meeting. He also said he'd be meeting the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and also King Abdullah of Jordan, amongst other people, somewhere in the Middle East. He wouldn't confirm where, but there has been a lot of suggestions from several quarters, and several sources have told Al Jazeera that there should be a meeting. There is attempts to get a meeting in Amman in Jordan at some stage, possibly Saturday, but there's no confirmation of this. There's no solid suggestion that that will take place at that location. But certainly that was said by the US Secretary of State in Paris, and the hopes are those talks will take place. They'll all be bilateral, it's thought, and so we're not expecting any summit of any sort at this stage. And also, it would be too far-fetched to think that there could be any sort of prerequisite to peace talks. The issue is the Temple Mount or Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, and that seems to be the key area where if there could be some agreement there could be some easing of the tension here in Israel. But it is going to be, it's a long shot. It's a long shot to expect that there's any progress. And certainly John Kerry has indicated on a number of occasions that he's not that optimistic.
Thanks very much. Andrew Simmons, live for us in West Jerusalem. Well, the latest attack in southern Israel happened as Israel's cabinet imposed new security measures. It's expanding the stop and frisk powers of security forces and is banning Arab laborers from schools in 4 cities, including the commercial capital Tel Aviv. As Andrew Simmons mentioned there, US Secretary of State John Kerry is due to meet the Israeli Prime Minister in Germany this week. Kerry is also planning to sit down with the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas. That's likely to take place in Jordan. He will talk to both about how to end the violence, which continues despite Israel deploying thousands of extra police and soldiers. Mike Hanna reports now on the response to mounting tensions in Israel and the occupied territories from West Jerusalem.
A regular Sunday meeting of the Israeli cabinet amidst extraordinary political crisis. And the Prime Minister once again denies the accusation that his government is attempting to change the arrangements regarding access to what he calls the Temple Mount, the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound.
Only Israel alone, is the guarantor of the holy sites on the Temple Mount. The reason the status quo has been violated is not because we changed it. We didn't change anything. The orders of prayer, the visiting rights have not changed for the last 15 years.
But Palestinians are adamant Israeli attempts to increase control over the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound is the root cause of the current conflict.
They want Jewish control over Al-Aqsa and digging under it to destroy it, while Muslim nations are sleeping. That's why the people of Jerusalem have started the revolution.
And amidst the extreme tension, a military ceremony in Tel Aviv. The guest of honor, the new chairman of the US Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, here to discuss resumption of talks about defense aid, which Israel suspended earlier this year in protest against the Iran nuclear deal that signals a warming in what has been a fractious relationship in recent times, and it's evidence that the US will continue to conduct business as usual with even the most right-wing of Israeli governments.
Here in Israel's biggest mass circulation newspaper, the headline, "Ready to Draw." This is a picture of a government minister who has recently taken his gun out of the safe and is now wearing it all the time.
Naftali Bennett's settler movement dominates government, along with hardline religious nationalists. This is not a body likely to deviate from the most extreme response to mounting Palestinian protest. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, West Jerusalem.
Now, there have also been clashes across the occupied West Bank. Renee O'Day has been following developments there from Ramallah.
The situation across the occupied West Bank remains quite tense. On Sunday, we saw several clashes break out, including in cities like Bethlehem, Tul Kerem, as well as in Hebron. Now, Hebron in particular is a flashpoint location. On a normal day when there is no unrest, it's quite sensitive and tense because of the close proximity in which Israeli settlers and Palestinians live within the city. Now, Palestinians have been saying that they've become increasingly worried over the past 2 days with news of the alleged knife attacks that have been happening in cities in the occupied West Bank. They say that they're afraid that because of these alleged attacks, that Israel might impose some kind of restriction on cities in the West Bank. Now, all of these clashes and the tension erupted when Palestinians say that Israel was provoking the situation at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has always maintained that the status quo at the compound is not going to change, but Palestinians do not believe that. Now, when it comes to the Palestinian government, their stance has always been that Palestinians have a right to be angry and a right to protest so long as it is done peacefully.
Well, more now on the attack at the bus station in Beersheba. Witnesses have described their fear following this incident and so many others.
Do I need to live in a world where I'm afraid to leave home or go to my college studies, to work or to go shopping? Everything is frightening, and I want the police to take more action and an increased security presence.
Well, joining me now via Skype from Oxford here in the UK is Mahan Abedin, an analyst at online news site Middle East Eye. Thank you very much for speaking to us. If I could start by asking you about the implications of this latest attack in Beersheba in southern Israel. It took place at a very busy bus station in the center of town, despite a widespread military and police presence, areas that have been cordoned off. Can you start by giving me your assessment of what took place and how it was able to happen?
Well, what's taken place is quite surprising, really, not just in the context of the latest upsurge in violence since early October, the so-called third intifada, if we can call it that, but also in the context of wider security issues going back well over a decade. Now, you and your viewers may well remember the issues that were dominant back 10 years ago during the so-called second intifada, when there were suicide bombings inside Israel proper. And so the Israelis beefed up security considerably, foremost by building the wall that separated the West Bank from Israel proper, and that stopped a great deal of attacks. And in fact, for over a decade now, we haven't really witnessed a serious terror-related incident within Israel proper. So what's occurred tonight is interesting in that context, and is clearly a breach of Israeli security. And of course, it begs the question as to whether this attack was a lone wolf attack, which has been the consistent pattern over the past 2 weeks in occupied East Jerusalem and in occupied West Bank, or whether this was organized at some level by some of the militant Palestinian organizations.
Well, how difficult is it going to be to prevent attacks staged by individuals, as we've seen so far, who don't necessarily have the operational support of any one group or organization?
Well, clearly in areas where there's a critical mass of very disenchanted and frustrated Palestinian youth, for instance, in the occupied Eastern Jerusalem, occupied West Bank, that's going to be quite difficult. But in areas of Israel proper, for instance, in Beersheba today, that is not necessarily too hard, because Israeli security is formidable, and it's very, very difficult even for Palestinians acting in a lone capacity to stage attacks. So even if this was a lone wolf attack, it would still be very interesting, and I suspect very worrying for Israeli security. However, it's not entirely unprecedented, even in the past 2 weeks, because there were a couple of incidents north of Tel Aviv a few days ago when a couple of Israelis were likely wounded. But in any case, it's a worrying development for Israeli security agencies.
So might they then change the way in which they've responded so far in the aftermath of this attack in Beersheba?
Well, Israel can only beef up security, starting from a very, very high point. Israel is arguably the most formidable security state in the world. Now, of course, there's, ramping up security has the unintended consequence of increasing frustration, increasing alienation. For instance, especially in the Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem, where Israel has imposed very draconian security measures with the checkpoints and very tightly controlling access into these areas, entry and exit. That has the unintended consequence of ramping up frustration, alienation, which is arguably at the very heart of these latest bouts of violence.
Well, thank you very much. It was good to get your thoughts on this story, get your
You're
analysis. Mahan Abedin, analyst in security and terrorism. Appreciate your time. Well, we do have much more still to come for you on the Al Jazeera News Hour.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.